Hello, and thanks for joining us on NCI Live. I'm David Groth, I'm your host, and I'm a technical sales specialist from Network Center. And today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity for the small business. Joining me today is Jason Dahl. He's a senior security engineer at Network Center, and he's an expert in cybersecurity. So, welcome, Jason. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Uh, Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody who's listening that they can join us live join us live in the chat on either YouTube or LinkedIn, and go ahead and chat us your questions so that we can answer them live on air. We'll be happy to do it as best we can, and you've got an expert at your disposal, so please feel free to ask those questions. And with that, Jason, again, welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to get started here today. Let's just jump right into it. I want to get started. I
Okay.
have a couple of statistics here. One of the biggest ones is that we're talking about small businesses, right? And most of these are under 300, and that's pretty large number. But it says here that 43% of small businesses are targeted for cybersecurity. Why do you think that is? What can you tell us about that?
Uh, One of the biggest reasons why an attacker again, or malicious people will go after small business, because they just simply do not have the resources that a larger organization has. They just don't have the staffing. A lot of times they just don't have the IT budget to do a lot of the cybersecurity things. But the great thing is with small businesses that companies like Microsoft and all these guys, they're starting to help them by have you don't have to we're starting to get to a point where you don't have to have a large investment to do the basic things to reduce your attack surface within your organization, which again, eventually over time, the smaller you make that attack surface, the better you're going to be overall for cybersecurity.
Okay, so you're a security engineer. So let's talk just briefly in a 10,000-foot view. What are
Mhm.
some of you use the word attack surface. What is an attack surface? What does that mean
So
for an
attack
average person?
Yeah, so attack surface is actually just what do I have on the network? So we're talking your workstations, your servers, networking gear, firewalls, all of those things. But we're also talking about, okay, what ports are open on these devices? What software or applications are running these devices? So again, the more applications and the more ports open and the more PCs and servers that you have, the larger your surface actually becomes. And that's where, again, by doing some security practices, we can reduce that by limiting what ports are open on certain machines and other items like that.
So it's kind of what exposure you have
Yep,
to
you
an
have.
attacker. Yep, to potential attackers, right?
Correct. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So what kinds of attacks might those be?
Those types, of course, we know virus, malware. Right now, ransomware is huge, where again, they're going to take over your network. They're going to basically hold your systems for ransom. Phishing is also another one. So we've seen more spear phishing. So that's going after one individual. So CEOs a lot of the times are targeted, or people under them are targeted because the simple fact that they're the chief executive officer of that organization. So they're going to have a lot of things at their disposal that an attacker's like, hey, this is probably a good person to go after.
Right.
And then we also have spyware, which is another type of tax.
And so then in smaller businesses, to put the focus more on a small businesses typically on their website might have the owner's name and sometimes email address listed right there on their website, right?
Correct.
So why would
Correct.
that be more affected on, say, a small business? Why is that number so high, the 43%? Do you think it's because they're an easier target? Do you think there's something
Uh,
like that?
Very much so, very much so. Because again, when you do have large organizations, like an AT&T or Verizon, those companies have the resources
Mhm.
to commit to these things. So again, they do have a large, again, like we say, attack surfaces, but again, they have the resources and the availability for this. Whereas normally in small business, either you have one individual or really you don't really have anybody that handles your day-to-day cybersecurity or IT operations. So a lot of times it's just the small business just honestly doesn't know what is actually happening, because they simply just don't have the time, the resources, and the money or these items put into their cybersecurity framework.
Mhm. So what types of, you talked about viruses, right? You talked
Hmm.
about ransomware, you talked about phishing and spyware, just general categories of malware. So
Hmm.
what, in a very broad sense, what are some of the things that businesses and small businesses, again, I'm talking categories now, um, that people can do for defense against these types of attacks?
Yeah, so some of the items that, again, that we would consider for free or, labor involved or whatever, would be just simply updating your servers, making sure, or, updating all of your systems, making sure that your operating system is patched, that your applications are getting patched. Um, you're locking down what you can lock down. And a lot of times, just by doing those basic steps, you are reducing your vulnerability to the outside world. So again, when a virus is released or something like that, a lot of even just your antivirus, like even Microsoft Defender, they're very quickly now going, okay, we have this 0 day. Let's change a couple of things. Let's update the virus definition file. And now, we're seeing these items get alerted on those items much quicker now than we ever were before. So
So
that helps the small business alone just by updating and doing these, minor things.
So I'm going to play, devil's advocate here. So I'm a small business owner. I've got 5 employees, just
Hmm.
real small business. Um, and I'm just going to, my automatic thought is, well, doesn't my firewall take care of all of this for me? I mean, doesn't that just protect me, blanket protection?
No, not in that term, because again, let's say for instance, like we do have a phishing attack. So even within Windows itself, if you were to turn on the firewall, it's called a connection a connectionless firewall. So when you or connectful firewall, so connection state. So when I
Mhm.
connect to something out in the internet world, it automatically is going to come back because it's already going to see that I have that connection open to
Mhm.
come back. So then when I do go to that website that I was phished to, when I click on a link, that connection is already established through the firewall all the way to my PC.
Mhm.
So then that's where, within these websites, they'll initiate like an installation of a program or something like that coming from the outside in that is going to get installed in your PC. So right there, it already negates the firewall because of the fact that, an employee or someone did something to allow that person through the firewall.
So it's kind of like, hey, officer, the pickpocket says that
Yeah,
the officer, like, hey, he came to me, right?
yeah.
Basically,
What am I supposed to do?
same
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yep, yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's more than one thing that needs to be put in place. It's not just one thing that we do. It's
No, yeah, there's if anybody comes to you and says, "Hey, there's a one bullet and you can fix all your cybersecurity," they're lying to you, because there's not.
okay.
There's many different things that we have to do to limit that, surface again. And again, can I say that you're going to be protected 100%? No. There's, 0 day vulnerabilities out there, but what the biggest thing is
What?
just being aware.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to interrupt. You said 0 day vulnerabilities. For those of us that are listening, what is a 0 day vulnerability?
So a 0 day vulnerability would be, most recently we had Log4j. That's probably one of the bigger ones that people know about. When that happens, is it means it's a piece of software that has the ability to allow an attacker to basically do whatever they want to that system and then escalate, elevate their permissions or their ability to become administrator. And that was one of the ones that just came out, that Log4j. It's installed on literally everything for the most part. And it will allow an attacker to take over that system with very little user interaction on anybody else's part other than just the user themselves. And it's just that the reason why they call it a 0 day is because they were not informed. A lot of times when these researchers find vulnerabilities, they'll contact Microsoft and be like, hey, we found these 4 vulnerabilities. What are you guys going to do to fix them? And then what happens at that point, um, if they don't know about it and it's released right away, then that's a 0 day. It's just something that we found that day that's been reported out there that, hey, you need to fix this, because we didn't have any prior knowledge of that vulnerability before.
Right. We need to fix it immediately, and nobody has been
immediately.
researching it or out there looking for it, but they found this thing that's incredibly important.
Correct.
Fair to
Yes.
say that a lot of those antivirus companies and the manufacturers of software, like i.e. um, Microsoft, Symantec, Norton, all these companies, they find a lot of these things. But it's more, would you say, the software uh, publisher?
Most, yeah, most time it's the software. There's something within the software that was written that basically allows a user or an attacker unfettered access to that system.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, what other kinds of security pieces can be are put in place, I should say,
Mhm.
for to prevent some of these types of attacks?
Yeah, so again, the attacks can happen, but another good thing is just knowing that when the attack does happen, what is it that we can do as an organization, as a small business, to limit the amount of the spread? So for instance, if there's 5 employees, for instance, and one of them they're like, oh, the system's starting to act kind of weird,
Mm,
the biggest thing to do is just basically isolate that machine, unplug it from the network. You can keep it running, but the biggest thing is unplug it from the network, disable the network adapters, and things like that to eliminate the spread.
mhm,
So that would just be one thing, just notifications and logging
mhm,
are kind of basic things that will allow you to be like, oh, wait, there is something going on. I need to take care of this. And even with logging, you have syslog and you have Windows Event Forwarder
mhm.
that are free applications within the server itself. So it's just setting it up is what the actual initial cost would be, for instance.
Right, right. So there are some things that are part of the systems you might own. You mean even Windows that can help in these regards. Is that a fair
Yeah,
statement?
exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's great. I'm going to pause here for just 1 second and say that those of you that are listening, please feel free to send us your chats and just remind everybody that we are live. So if you have questions for Jason or myself, for that matter, and you'd like to have us answer those questions live on the air, by all means, chat them in, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. All right. So returning to our discussion, excuse me. Um, what? Let's see, what's another good thing to discuss here? What other things that we? Oh, why are here? Here's a good related question. So, why are small businesses specifically important in we'll call it the cyber war, the
Hmm.
security fight, all of
Hmm.
that? Why are small businesses a piece of the puzzle that we need to pay particular attention to?
Well, small businesses are very important because a lot of the times that they offer a resource or something that they're selling to larger corporations. So they are offering, one example I always use is that if I'm making a widget and that widget's for some organization and I'm a small business with 5 people, I'm the only one making this widget. Well, what happens is if I'm attacked and they take down my control systems, they take down my factory. Well, what's going to ultimately happen too is it's going to affect all of the people that I support as well. And a lot of times, you know, those are the individuals that a lot of attackers go after because they're like, hey, I see that you're providing this to Apple Computer. Now I have a way in through this small business to possibly get into Apple Computer.
Right,
So
right, right,
that's,
right.
it's kind of that daisy chain that we look at. So small businesses are, literally the frontline workers too that we need to be able to curb some of these attacks and stop them or slow them down.
So really, to take it to another level, these multimillionaire Fortune 100 companies, the defense companies, and whatever, it is possible that these security things could lead, dependent, whatever you want to call it, say
Yep.
a security ticking time bomb,
Hmm.
could start from a small supplier who has to connect to the big company, right?
Correct.
That's a
Correct.
fair
Yep. That's
statement?
perfect. Yep.
They need to upload stuff to the big company, and yet they're a small entry point. If you've ever seen the old movie Superman 3
Yeah.
with Richard Pryor, Richard
Yep.
Pryor gets drunk and connects to a computer that's connected to the big company because he wants to hide his tracks. I use that as an
Yep.
example a lot
Yep.
because
No, that's a perfect one. Yeah. Yep.
they're
Exactly.
connected to the big multi-conglomerate company, but it's some small rinky-dink company in Smallville.
Yep,
So,
that's the one that allowed that individual or those individuals to go in there. So
right.
it's always important to protect those small businesses. And again, when a cyber attack does happen, large companies can usually recover it, i.e., Home Depot, Target, where they have the money and the resources
Hmm.
to be able to do those types of things. Whereas there's one article I was reading that um, 60% of companies, small business companies, go out of business after 6 months after a security breach, which is just heartbreaking
That was going to be
because
my
of
next
simple,
question. What is
yeah,
the damage?
you know,
What can this affect, right?
yeah, basically a lot of companies, they will never recover from it again and they'll actually shutter because of the attack. And a lot of times too, it just really depends on the type of attack that happened.
Mhm.
um, Ransomware attacks, stuff like that. So consumers nowadays are very much watching how well is my information protected. But when I do give that small business my permission to have that information, are they protecting it
Mhm.
for me, and their customers? So that's why small business is, vital to, well, we all know small business is vital to the American backbone. So
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. So you're out on the front lines, right? You're out there fighting the good fight in the security war.
trying to, yeah.
Uh, what are you seeing that what are some of the issues that you're seeing that small businesses are running into in terms of attacks? How often are people are being attacked? Companies, rather, small businesses.
Small business, and even with that too, they have seen the increase of 424% with cyber attacks just over
Wow.
the last year. So just 2020 alone, we've seen a huge increase of small businesses, people going after small businesses.
Wow.
And, you know, over the years, and even, 2021 was pretty bad. 2022 is going to be worse. We're hoping that eventually we can start seeing trends and applications are being built so that at one point here in the next few years, hopefully we'll start seeing a decline. But right now, it's pretty much the golden age of cyber attacks that
Mm.
we have to kind of stay
If you can
aware of
call
and
it
stay
that,
cognizant.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not really a golden age, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's, what are some things like, okay, we've talked about the good, the bad, the ugly. We've talked about what are the attacks, like some of the categories of attacks, right? There's literally thousands of different
Thousands, yeah.
attacks.
Yep.
You could look them up, you can Google them. I read a statistics that every small business, I mean, every business for that matter, but small
Mhm.
businesses specifically, everyone is attacked at least once a day. You may
Correct,
not know
correct.
it,
Yep,
whether it be a failed attempt or whatever, but they're attacked once a day.
yep.
So you've mentioned it many times. Small businesses most likely do not have the resources,
Mhm.
uh, depending on size. Because an average, would you say it's fair to say that you mentioned it that they don't have the resources? What
Mhm.
kind of resources would it take to combat a successful cyber attack? Successful meaning that the attacker got through and managed to compromise some system. What types of resources would they need?
Well, so research that you need is actually, again, you need someone to be able to lay the plan out for you to say, hey, this is what we need to do. These are the things that we need to start watching. Um, but again, it really comes down to, for one, how much do you want to invest, but then also is what is it that you're trying to protect?
Mm,
What are we trying to do here, for your company? Yes, we're trying to protect you from multiple different things, but we kind of need to know more of like what is your sensitive stuff that we need to protect more
mm,
than anything else. So it's kind of just one of those things, knowing your network. What do you actually have in your network that is communicating? And just
right,
by, it's surprising, even when I've worked in large organizations and small organizations, a lot of times they just simply don't know what's on your network, you know,
right.
and with that, you have to choose your resources and choose them wisely. So, just simply scanning your network once a day to see if there's anything new, boom, right there. And there's tools like Nmap and Angry IP that you just type in your IT scope and go,
Mhm,
hey, what is out there? What is new on my network
mhm.
that I'm going to find? And so that's
Sure.
one of, just small resources, things like that that you can use to help yourself. That's free.
Yeah. Sure. Well, that's great. So that's about, kind of protecting. What about just like I said, for a successful attack? something, what is involved in fixing something like that? Like,
Mhm,
just so that to truly get across the idea of the impact.
mhm,
So if you were to say like, okay, my company, again, that theoretical 5 user company,
mhm.
and I will say the selling widgets, the typical example, but how much in theory does that cost someone? You know, time and
Time, yep.
resources, whatever. What does that
Yep,
cost?
and oh yeah, you can go from $1,000, total cost for just some things that you want to implement, like a Windows server with logging and stuff like that. But then we can go up to millions of dollars, and many, many people needed to protect that resource. So,
Mhm.
cost is kind of, again, yeah, it's a hard thing to really pin down because again, as you know, and I'm sure like a lot of people listening, there's just so much within cybersecurity, and the amount of resources that are needed to fix some things, are exponential. But I'll say that before an attack, it's easier. It's sometimes harder for companies to say, hey, we need this money or we need this resource, but yet they haven't been attacked yet.
Right.
So what happens is you're like, oh, I'll push that off next year. I'll push it off next year. What happens, I guarantee, if there was an attack, the amount of money that you'll need to recover from that attack is
Mhm.
far more than you would need to just put into the resources or to implement some of those things to have stopped that, attack from happening.
So it's the typical ounce of prevention, pound of cure.
Exactly, 100%.
Yep. Yep. Gotcha. So, so what other things? Where can we start? Right. Where do we start as a small business? Because
Hmm.
obviously, if we have no plan,
Yeah.
we're a small business. We have no plan of where to
Hmm.
go. We got nothing apart from, hey, I got some kind of firewall that came from uh,
Yeah.
whatever my provider is, right? And
Correct. Yep.
it's a cable modem and it's a little firewall of some kind.
Yep.
Where do I start?
So again, the handful of things are one of the biggest things. Again, know what's on your network. Know that these things are on there. From there, you want to make sure that you are updating your software. Like, yes, we all know to update Windows and things like that, but we also need to make sure Adobe, Reader is getting updated, Chrome's getting updated, Edge, all the programs, applications, all of them at some point or other will need an update of some type to stop an attack. Another thing is by, implementing MFA. MFA, right now is a huge one that will protect you from 99.9% of probably those attacks.
We just had we just had an NCI live on that recently. And fun
Hmm.
fact, just this past week, I got protected by two separate attacks personally
Oh,
on
nice.
my
Yeah.
own personal information by using MFA. I've literally have turned it on all my accounts in the past couple of years, and it
Same.
was
Yeah.
honestly, it was my Casey's gas station account,
Yep.
and but that still got my some of my
Personal
personal
information.
information.
Yep.
And I forget what the other one was. Oh, it was my Apple account.
Mine
But
also got I
did
also
it?
got the alert this weekend from Apple saying there's something going on.
Yeah.
Go check your MFA. And
But
but even like when stuff like that happens, for instance, let's say
mhm,
Microsoft texts me, it's like, hey, you're being, or Apple texts me, it's like, hey, your phone's been compromised, blah blah blah. Well,
mhm,
I'm actually going to go to Apple's website instead
manually,
of clicking, yeah,
manually. Yep.
manually go out to Apple and then log into my account to say, okay, what actually is this real or is this not real?
Yep.
Because again, it's a baiting thing. So if you're
That's
like,
the phishing.
hey, yeah, the
That's the
phishing,
phishing.
yep,
Yep.
hey, I'm going to go after you. I'm going to see that you have an Apple device or something. And then right there, you're like, oh, I'm going to click on this as fast as I can. And then boom, you've just opened your phone
Yep.
up to an attacker, possibly
And that's just one, well,
one.
two in our cases, but
Yep.
one individual. And now we got a now let's say it's just our personal names and phone numbers and
Hmm.
addresses. Could be go next level worse, our credit cards, right? Or
Yep.
what have you, whatever we've got stored, because you can store those on websites, right?
Yeah.
Next level, let's go small business. And what if your accounting software is online? What if your customer data is online and the logins for those are not protected
Hmm.
by what? So let's continue on this conversation.
Yep.
What else can we do? We talked about patching, right? Knowing what's on our network. What else could we do?
Yep. So even with MFA, so once you do MFA password restrictions, the one thing with MFA is that you can reduce the amount of password changes and the length.
Hmm.
Another thing actually is really big is just education. educating your staff on, okay, what does a bad email link look like? Show
Mm-hmm.
them like how, like this is how I hover over something and I see where it's going to take me,
Mm-hmm.
out to some random website that I should not click on. So education is also very important within your staff because again, the attack doesn't start just by itself. Normally, it's someone has to do something to
Right.
facilitate that attack from happening. And most of the time, it's a staffer that's clicking on a link or doing something that's causing that to happen.
Right.
So yeah, education is just as vital as many other things.
Right. And I think that particular point is especially important because, you go back to the password length, for example.
Hmm.
If you make the password requirements I've always said to people, you've got to balance security with the understanding of your users,
Hmm.
because if you don't, you make that password and make the ultra tight security, users will find a way to circumvent that to make their lives easier. And if
Correct.
they're
Yeah.
not understanding it, like that's where you get the writing down of their password on a sticky
Passwords.
note and putting it in
Yep.
a drawer somewhere.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
not security.
Yep. Well, and the thing is, like, even when it comes to passwords, you have to look at this too. If I have an 11 character password, upper, lower numbers, it would take 41 years to crack that password.
Hmm.
But now if I have an 8 character password, same with upper, lower number, it would only
Hmm.
take me 8 hours. So you
Hmm.
see just the number length alone, increase the amount of time.
Yep.
Usually they'll be like, oh, special characters and all this. Well, if you're still at 8 characters within that cracking time, I can still crack it within time.
Right. 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 We do have a question. One of the questions is, what are some low cost or free things that I can do to improve security?
Yep.
It's a great
So
question. Yeah.
again, yeah, it is. One of the great things is again, know your network. So again, Nmap is free, and then Angry IP is actually an easier one. It's just a little GUI. You type in, and
Are
then
those
as it goes
programs?
and
Are those like Windows
correct,
programs?
yeah. Angry IP is just a program that you install, and you just type in your IP range, and it'll go out on that IP range and look to see what's out there. So boom, that's one item. Sysmon, which is a product by Microsoft, which helps with logging. But what Sysmon does, it actually tracks like where am I going? Like what DNS connection am I making? It tells me what processes are started up. So from forensics view and just from your own view, you can see these things starting up. And that's also logging that stuff is actually also free. Past, updating your pretty much all software patching of some type is free because the manufacturer is going to release these updates and things like that that you'll be able to, update. And a lot of that stuff's free. It's just making sure that those PCs are getting patched, and that's the part that takes the time as well.
You just
Um,
have to do it.
yep,
Yep.
yep. And then education too. There's free sites out there that you can go to that just help educate your staff a little bit more.
Hmm. Use your Google. Google
Exactly. Google everything.
I'm going to mention this. The sad fact is that a lot of the I'm going to say hacking. It's more of the older term, but a lot of the
Hmm.
cybersecurity tools that are used out there, the ones that are used to do the attacks, are
Hmm.
free or extremely
It,
low cost as well. So hence why there
exactly.
are so many attacks being done, because the benefit is huge
Yep.
and the cost is low. So
Yep. Well, yeah, from the attacker side point, that yeah, it's basically a zero cost to them.
yeah.
Because again, they'll write a script, they'll get that program, and then again, they just launch it, and then
Mhm.
they just kind of sit back and see what pings.
Sure. So one of the questions that has been brought up here at Network Center, um, the we've only got a couple minutes left, so I just want to cover like one more quick question. One of the things
Hmm.
that's been brought up, and we've talked about it in other NCI lives, is cyber liability insurance. Any
Hmm.
thoughts on that? Any comments on that?
So yeah, when it comes to cybersecurity insurance, it is a good thing, but again, you want to look at what am I protecting? Again, if you're protecting, like we said with that widget, you're the only one that can make that widget. So you're protecting that intellectual property right there. So that's another thing, So when you start to see like, okay, if I was to be attacked and they were to take down my company, how much is that going to affect me? Honestly, how much is it going to affect me? And that's kind of where you need the base. Like, well, for one, what am I trying to protect?
Mhm.
Two, do I really need to pay this money for this cyber security? I mean, if I have offsite on, if I'm doing some of the security things that are suggested, you probably don't need to get a large insurance policy. Yeah, it helps to have it, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, what am I willing to pay, and how quickly can I recover
Mhm.
compared to what my cybersecurity, what my price will be, or what am I going to get back from them, things like that.
So it's cost benefit. So
Yeah,
look
exactly.
at what your operations cost on a daily basis. Look at what your data is worth, and be hard on it. Yeah,
Yep.
be
Yep.
hard on
Be realistic. Yep.
realistic. Don't just pie in the sky, but be realistic.
Mhm.
Maybe take
Yep.
some numbers from a spreadsheet and look at it, and then say, okay, this is what it would cost me to be down for a week.
Exactly. Yep. If I can make it a week and it's not to be that much of a cost on me, then by all means, yeah, you probably don't need cybersecurity insurance.
But is it also fair to say that most companies couldn't be down for a week?
True. Very true. Yeah, without going out of business. I mean, look what happened with COVID. I mean, yeah, that was 2 years, but even right away, within months, we had people already shuttering their doors because they were out of business.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I hate to do this, but we've kind of
Yeah,
reached the end of our time.
I think we could talk for this about security forever. So,
As with every topic, it's always been fun to talk to
yep.
people. Um,
Yeah, it was great.
so it's been very fun and informative. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
For the rest of us out here joining us, if you have questions that are after this live broadcast, feel free to check out our website at www.netcenter.net, or you can email us at info@netcenter.net, or go ahead and visit us on any of our social media channels. If you're visiting us on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe. It helps us out. And also click the notification bell button, because then you'll be notified on our new NCI Live, our latest NCI Live broadcasts, which happen every 2 weeks on Wednesdays. So, Jason, thanks again. You've been a wealth of knowledge, and it's been a great pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, David. Thank you.
And with that, everyone, thanks for coming by and joining us here on MCI Live. See you again soon.